first requested to me by Rowan Cavanagh, directed by Danny Boyle, and based on the 1993 novel of the same name. The 1996 film Trainspotting takes place in Edinburgh, Scotland, and primarily follows a group of friends who are mostly heroin addicts. Each of these friends has a different way of going about to get their fix, but for all of them, it controls their life. They spend most of their days together getting high and numbing their pain, but eventually a few of them try to get their lives back on track in a variety of different ways. As their addictions continue to control them, their lives get more and more chaotic. Trainspotting was a film that I knew very little about. I think I was made aware of the premise before, sometime in the comments by one of you guys, I can't remember when, but I'd never seen the trailer, honestly. I didn't know who was in it besides Ewan McGregor, and generally I was just fairly unaware of what this experience would be like. Overall though, I enjoyed Trainspotting a lot, as much as you can enjoy a film about, destructive lifestyles of heroin addicts, but it's more so meant to be enlightening and informative than entertaining, but you get the point. I think some of you guys told me before that Trainspotting was sort of similar to Requiem for a Dream, the 2000 film, and you were definitely right, it is. But there are a couple minor differences I'd say between the two. I think Trainspotting is pretty dark overall. There's some really dark and depressing things that happen in the film, but I don't think it's quite as dark and hopeless as Requiem for a Dream was. The difference to me is that in Trainspotting, things actually do improve for the characters at points in time, and there is actually some light sprinkled into the story. Requiem for a Dream only gets worse and worse as the characters sort of spiral out of control deeper into their addictions. Trainspotting pulls off similar moves, but it's a little more balanced about it. Trainspotting somehow gets really dark at times and then really silly other times, which is obviously an odd combination, but it usually works honestly. I actually found the comedy to be a refreshing change of pace here, and generally pretty well executed. There are times when I found the humor to be a little too British for my taste, a little too silly and just generally present probably just a little bit too often, but like I mentioned, the approach does work for the most part. I don't think this is a movie you're going to turn on for good laughs. It's more so a change of pace kind of deal, honestly, but it works, and it's good for some light chuckles, I'd say, which is certainly a nice thing. However, once you realize that the things you're laughing at are at the expense of the characters that are suffering from some major psychological issues, you'll probably start to dial things back a tad. I think what hooked me the most overall, though, was the evolution of the characters over time. Because honestly, watching them degrade over time as they struggle with addiction, run-ins with the law, and just stumbling their way through life to take it one day at a time just to survive is pretty difficult to watch. And in a way, you feel bad for them because their addictions are controlling their lives and their personalities. And no matter how hard they try, they just can't stay on the straight and narrow for long periods of time. I also found the characters to be a little bit of a con as well, because I found myself more invested in their plight to overcome their addictions rather than the actual characters themselves. I felt a little more invested in Requiem for a Dream's characters because I found them to be more interesting and just a tad more complex in their motivations. But I think the crew we get in Trainspotting is fairly good, fairly interesting overall. I thought all the performances were good too, but not surprisingly, Ewan McGregor steals the show here. He was excellent and honestly gets a tighter grip on the reins as the lead as the film progresses, as things progress through the story. It kind of becomes his story, and the other characters begin to just sort of intersect into it. This approach works because the supporting performances are good, and Ewan McGregor is excellent as a very flawed but very dynamic character. I like how the film shows the evolution of Rent as a character. All these characters really, and no matter how hard they try, they always get dragged back into their addiction and into a life of crime. Some of them make stronger efforts to improve than others, but despite that, they're still destined for a life of darkness controlled by their addictions and temptations. There's some interesting commentary about all that stuff, but most importantly, it gives us a front row seat, a look at the life of a drug addict. Many of us look at drug addicts and we don't understand them, but what Trainspotting attempts to show us is how these addicts are basically self-medicating. They're ruled and controlled by their drug habits, and they get high to numb the pain and to feel good, honestly. It becomes a recurrent cycle of bad decisions and poor outcomes because they just don't know how to survive any other way. I also thought it was cool, similar to Requiem for a Dream, and I know I'm mentioning that movie a lot, but it's relevant, I promise. It was cool how they give you the perspective of the addict as they begin to self-medicate with their drug use, usually heroin. Things start feeling fantastical, sort of like a dream sequence where everything is about as perfect as it can be. And this is meant to drive home the point that this is how these characters feel when they get high. This is like the only time they feel like they're truly complete. And that's a really sad and dark thing to think about. I also found the ending to be awesome. There's a lot of cases where I mention the ending either because it ends the film on a high note, a memorable note, or goes the opposite direction and sort of taints your experience. Luckily, this ending is a good one. It's good because it's just as clear as it needs to be, and it leaves you wanting more, and it works for this story. It leaves you wanting to know more about what direction the characters are going to go next, and how they're going to try to overcome the struggles in their lives that are holding them down. It's dark, honestly, yet upbeat at the same time, which I thought was a nice touch. As for the pros cons, I thought Trainspotting had a creative story about drug addiction and struggles, nice touches of comedy that provide balance, a great leading performance from Ewan McGregor, and a very good ending. As for the cons, sometimes the comedy can feel a little too forceful, and the supporting characters aren't super interesting overall. But overall for the film, I'm going to give Trainspotting an 8.5 out of 10, and definitely recommend you check it out if you're looking for an engaging and thought-provoking think piece. This one has lots to offer and is fairly well-rounded overall. So have you guys seen Trainspotting before? What did you think of it? And if not, let me know why not. And also let me know your favorite Ewan McGregor performance. For me, it's still Obi-Wan, honestly, but I'm interested to hear what you guys think as well. Either way, this is WillFoxification signing off. See you in the next video.